Ever felt powerless against an all-controlling HOA? Let me tell you about the time I transformed a chairlift into the most nerve-wracking ride in America. It all began on an ordinary autumn morning when the crisp air at Pine Haven Estates, my secluded retreat, was suddenly pierced by the rumble of heavy machinery. I had spent the better part of 2 decades in the world of sound, crafting auditory experiences for some of Hollywood's most explosive films. When I retired, I envisioned a quiet life in my hand-hewn timber cabin, far removed from the chaos of city living. That dream, however, was about to be shattered by the unexpected reach of our homeowners association. I remember the day clearly. The sun was barely rising, casting long shadows over the forest that cradled my property. I stepped out onto my porch, expecting the usual gentle hum of nature, only to be greeted by a sight that sent a chill down my spine, a series of bright orange flags marking a line right across my land, and in the distance, the unmistakable silhouette of a chairlift tower. My heart pounded as I realized that the chairlift wasn't merely a part of some benign development, it was planned to cut directly over my cabin, intruding upon every inch of my privacy. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. The HOA had always been a reasonable group, maintaining our roads and preserving the rustic charm of Pine Haven. Yet, when I received a curt, dismissive message from Diane Reynolds, the new HOA president and a former resort developer with a knack for modernizing things her way, I knew something was amiss. "There's nothing to worry about," she had said in a tone that dripped with false cheer. But I wasn't convinced. My instincts screamed that this was more than a mere development project, it was an invasion of my sanctuary. Within weeks, construction equipment began rolling into our quiet community. Massive concrete forms, steel cables, and mechanical components appeared overnight, transforming our once tranquil environment into a chaotic construction site. I tried reaching out to Diane for a conversation, only to be met with condescending smiles and half-hearted reassurances. It quickly became apparent that the HOA had approved this chairlift without proper notice, using legal loopholes and backroom deals that left me, a humble homeowner and retired sound engineer, fighting an uphill battle against a system rigged in favor of progress over personal rights. Desperation pushed me into action. I spent days poring over every clause of the community covenants, searching for any shred of protection. Instead, I discovered that the board had slyly amended the rules, exploiting vague language to grant themselves far-reaching powers. When I challenged these changes in a hastily arranged meeting, I was dismissed as a troublemaker, an old man clinging to outdated notions of privacy in a world that was rapidly modernizing. The board, backed by powerful legal allies and even family connections, assured me that my concerns were unfounded. But they couldn't see what I could, the slow erosion of the very essence of my home. I knew I couldn't win in court. The legal system was skewed in favor of the majority, and the judge assigned to my case happened to be a close friend of Diane's brother. With every appeal, it became clear that the traditional route of legal recourse was a dead end. That's when I decided to turn to the one weapon I knew best, sound. For over 35 years, I had crafted soundscapes that could evoke terror, suspense, and awe. I had built my career on the belief that sound was as powerful as any visual effect. So, I began to engineer a counteroffensive, a meticulously designed auditory assault that would make the chairlift experience feel like a harbinger of disaster every time someone took a ride. I wasn't interested in damaging property or risking injury, I simply wanted to make people question the safety of the ride enough that they'd refuse to use it. In my home studio, surrounded by vintage mixing boards and directional speakers that I had once used to create cinematic masterpieces, I set to work. I spent countless nights recording the natural hum of the chairlift, capturing its ordinary sounds from every conceivable angle. Then, I layered in my own recordings, the ominous creak of aged steel, the subtle high-pitched whine of metal under stress, and even a carefully measured rumble that mimicked the sound of collapsing structures. I calibrated the frequencies to be just unsettling enough to induce an eerie feeling of impending disaster without crossing into outright danger. My plan was simple yet daring. I installed hidden weatherproof speakers along a discrete section of the lift's route, a stretch that hovered directly above my cabin. Using directional sound technology, I ensured that these speakers would only be heard by those in the chair, creating an illusion of instability that was impossible to ignore. The system was designed to activate only during peak times and under specific weather conditions when the wind picked up or the air turned crisp. This way, the effect would be sporadic, unpredictable, and, most importantly, incredibly convincing. I can still recall the first day I activated my contraption. The community had gathered for what Diane had dubbed a preview ride, an event intended to build excitement and showcase the new amenity. Homeowners from across Pine Haven eagerly boarded the chairs, their eyes wide with anticipation. I watched from a safe distance, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and determination as the chairlift began its routine, serene ascent over the forest. For the first couple of rotations, everything was as expected. The ride was smooth, the views breathtaking. But then, as the chairs approached the critical section above my property, the magic happened. A faint, eerie sound started to permeate the cabin, a sound so subtle it could be dismissed as nothing more than a trick of the wind. Then, gradually, the noise escalated. Passengers began to exchange uneasy glances as the chairlift seemed to come alive with the groan of strained metal and the ghostly echo of a structure on the brink of collapse. The sound was not constant, it ebbed and flowed, mimicking the unpredictable nature of mechanical failure. It wasn't long before panic set in. A former structural engineer among the riders was the first to hit the emergency stop button, convinced that the chairlift was experiencing catastrophic failure. In that moment, 27 people found themselves suspended in midair, helpless as the chairlift halted abruptly. The ensuing evacuation was chaotic, residents stranded, emergency services called in, and local news crews arriving on the scene. Social media exploded with videos and frantic messages. Within hours, hashtags and posts began to trend, and the once celebrated chairlift became a symbol of terror and uncertainty. Diane and the board scrambled to regain control of the narrative. They organized confidence rides, inviting homeowners and community influencers to experience the ride under supervised conditions. Yet, every time they did, a few of my carefully programmed sound sequences would slip through, leaving riders with the unnerving sensation of a disaster waiting to happen. One such ride ended with a resident in tears, claiming the sound had shattered any trust in the system. The board's efforts to mitigate the fallout only deepened the community's suspicions about the integrity of the project. The financial strain quickly became apparent. Emergency inspections were mandated, maintenance costs skyrocketed, and insurance premiums soared after the chairlift was reclassified as a high-risk installation. Meanwhile, the HOA's internal documents, once hidden behind layers of administrative jargon, began to leak. It became clear that the project had bypassed several regulatory approvals and that several contracts had been awarded without proper bidding. The board's nepotism and disregard for due process were laid bare for all to see. For weeks, I remained in the background, watching as the community began to rally against the very system that had once promised them enhanced living standards. Homeowners held meetings, staged protests, and demanded a complete audit of the chairlift project. The narrative had shifted. No longer was it just about a modern amenity, it was about the unchecked power of an HOA that seemed to prioritize development over the well-being and privacy of its residents. One chilly morning, as the first hints of winter crept in, the new board, elected by a surge of community outrage, announced that they would be rerouting the chairlift away from residential properties altogether. It was a hard-won victory. The adjustments came with a hefty price tag, but for the first time in months, it felt like our voices had been heard. The new plan preserved the scenic views and provided safe, reliable access without turning our homes into public spectacles. I still remember the final meeting, held in the community center, where the atmosphere was both somber and hopeful. The new board, led by a respected former judge, thanked everyone for their perseverance and assured us that future projects would be subject to strict oversight and genuine community input. As I sat there, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of triumph. I had never intended to become a rebel, but sometimes you have to fight for your home using the tools you know best. In the end, the chairlift remained a fixture in our community, but it had been transformed from a symbol of invasion into a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. My carefully engineered sounds, which had once sown panic and fear, were quietly dismantled once the community regained control. Yet, they served as a stark reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a determined individual can harness their unique talents to protect what matters most. As the snow began to fall gently over Pine Haven, I returned to my cabin, a sanctuary reclaimed. I knew that while the battle had been hard-fought, it was a victory not just for me, but for every resident who believed that home should be a place of peace and privacy, not a playground for corporate ambitions and unchecked power. And so, as I sit by my crackling fireplace, I reflect on the strange twists of fate that turned a chairlift into a battleground for privacy and dignity. My story isn't just about a piece of technology gone awry, it's about the enduring fight for personal freedom, the power of innovation when wielded for good, and the reminder that sometimes the most formidable weapon in our arsenal is the art of sound. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this tale of defiance and creative revenge, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more Storytime adventures. Remember, no matter how insurmountable the challenge may seem, there's always a way to reclaim your peace. Sometimes all it takes is a little ingenuity and a well-timed sound effect.